Ladies and gentlemen, there are many mistakes in Overwatch that could be holding you back for each and every character. While I know many of you want specific tips for your given hero, sometimes it's hard to fit everyone's mains in a day's video. That being said, today is not that day, and in this video, I would be covering one huge mistake or tip for every single hero in the game. Now, some of these you might know, but I guarantee you'll at least find something valuable, because even if you don't play a character for the tip I give, you can at least use these mistakes to abuse the enemy again and again for free wins. If you want to see in-depth VOD review breakdowns over literally every single character on this list, definitely go check out GameLeap.com. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it, shall we? Now, kicking it off with the first hero on our list, it's Genji. Now, the biggest mistake on Genji is when players are going in. You should almost never go in to try to get value at the enemy unless one of two things are true. Number one, you're going in to kill someone, you get your dash back. That gives you an out or a potential follow-up. Or number two, you both have an easy accessible out plus you reflect off cooldown. Imagine dashing through the enemy and having a wall to climb that puts you up and over natural cover, protecting you from the enemy. Now, as a bonus tip, usually the safest course of action when dashing in to kill someone is instantly insta-dashing back to the safety of your team. You net your advantage, you pick up the kill, and then you can reset with your team instead of potentially getting punished. Now, moving on to character number 2, this is Doomfist. Now, a big mistake that a lot of players make on Doomfist is they constantly rely on flashy rollouts with high risk, high reward payoffs, and they don't execute the regular cycles on Doomfist correctly. Now, I know you see crazy Doomfist do crazy insane rollouts on stream or in ranked, and I know it looks incredibly cool and it's satisfying to watch, but Overwatch League Doomfist don't do this. The best Doomfist in the world only execute the fundamentals. Now think about the flashy Doomfist like some type of Taekwondo, crazy looking martial art, right? That kind of crazy flashy play might look cool, but it's not the most effective. Straight up MMA would destroy in a 1v1 fight. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments down below. But ultimately, the point that you should understand here is that Doomfist can climb with low risk. It doesn't need to be flashy, it needs to be consistent, and that is the cycles of Doomfist. Learn them, practice them, and rely on them to help you climb. Now moving on to character number 3, we have Reinhardt. Now the biggest mistake I see on Reinhardt is just fire striking when you know the enemy Rein has shatter or he might be close to shatter. It seems that any low diamond Rein or lower will play right into fire striking and getting his whole team shattered. If you don't 100% know that the enemy Rein doesn't have shatter, do not fire strike and save your shatters for when Reins will play right into you and counter shatter them the second the fire strike animation goes up. Now moving on to character number 4, we have Ana. Now the biggest mistake that plagues Anas is wasting abilities for low impact plays. The biggest mistake I see when VOD reviewing Anas is they waste nade on their self for like 50 or less health. What the heck are you doing? Nade is one of the best aggressive based abilities in the entire game, and it should be used to heal only yourself at the very worst case scenario. And I'm serious about this. Healing your team isn't even the best case scenario. Using it aggressively on enemies is the best case scenario, and that's what you should be striving for if at all possible. If you're taking too much damage and you need to use this on yourself, your positioning needs work. Now moving on to character number 5, we have McCree. Now, the biggest problem with McCree is positioning errors that get you destroyed. McCree needs to be tethered to his tanks or supports or have a game plan to retreat quickly. Think about playing like an off angle or the high ground where he can easily take a few steps, roll, and then he's pretty close to his teammates to get PO or to get help. You don't want to be in the enemy's backline going on these crazy flanks. McCree's live or die by the positioning. Now, moving on to character number 6, we have Reaper. Now, the biggest mistake that players make with Reaper is they don't realize the power of lifesteal versus enemies. If you hit your shots, and they're not very hard to hit, and dodge any sort of the CC that's coming your way with your fade, then you could pretty much tank enemy fire and kill tanks pretty easily as long as it's not immense focus fire on you. So definitely abuse it, especially if you jump onto a Rein. You don't need to be afraid of him, just finish him off extremely quickly. Now moving on to character number 7, we have Roadhog. And the biggest problem I see when players are trying to hook or secure hooks or get one-shot hooks is players are just not killing people when they hook them. And a lot of times it's because they're still not doing preliminary damage to the target. Now, while the hook, step forward, shoot, melee is powerful, sometimes it's not always consistent, especially against those 250 HP heroes or some of the bulkier targets like tanks. Make it easier on yourself and do some right-click, convergence fire, alternate fire damage, because the more damage you do with that beforehand, the easier it is for you to one-shot the enemy more consistently. Now, moving on to character number 8, we have Lucio, and the biggest mistake is not utilizing both sides of Lucio's power level, the peel side or the aggressive duel side. In some scenarios, keeping your support alive with extra peel can be worth tons of value, but in other scenarios, killing the Widow that's on the high ground that keeps contesting your DPS, or even just contesting the Widow, can free up tons of space for your team. So you need to analyze what is going to give you the biggest chance of winning, and what does your team need in that moment that will give you the most impact and the most chance of winning. Now, moving on to character number 9, we have Echo. Now, the biggest problem with Echo is trying to fly too high versus hit scans. You are not Pharah, so stop playing like her. Echo really wants to be playing low to the ground like a lurker and not a Pharah. Use natural cover and burst hit scans in their uncomfortable range. What is their uncomfortable range, you ask? Depends on the hit scan. A Widowmaker doesn't like it when you're right on top of her. Against a McCree, you need to play outside of his flashbang range, but still in a pretty decent range. And against a soldier, you can also be right on top of him. It depends on the matchup, so just play in their uncomfortable range. Now, moving on to character number 10, we have Mercy. Now, the biggest mistake that Mercy players make are not pocketing or damage boosting anywhere near enough. You are not a primary healer. You do not heal giant chunks. You are a utility-based healer. In the same way that Zen's primary value comes from his Discord, Mercy's comes from pocketing and damage boosting. Every second you add damage, you can increase the pressure a DPS can output, and it's worth far more value than healing a tank from 300 HP to 400 HP. If you can make your McCree 2-tap a Pharah, he would have 3 or 4-tapped. That is worth so much potential value. Now, these videos take a great bit of time, but if you want to see one advanced tip for every hero or one ultimate tip for every hero, smash that like button and let me know down below so I know it's worthwhile to make these inclusive, value-packed videos. Now, moving on to the next character on the list, we have Mei. Now, the biggest mistake that many Mei players make is they fail to recognize that their freeze, their cryo freeze, can be used like a fade, and you can easily use it to dodge CCs and win 1v1 matchups. Especially when you start freezing someone like a McCree, he's heavily incentivized to stun you because if he gets frozen, he's effectively losing the matchup. So he plays right into you, basically blinking in and out of your freeze. Also, keep track of what enemies have mobility when you're trying to place a wall. If a Genji and a Deva cross over the border and you place a wall, those characters easily have mobility that could basically bait out your wall for free. So you really need a hero that doesn't have any sort of mobility to cross over the choke point before you wall it, or else you're not going to get any free value. Now, moving on to character number 12, we have Soldier 76. Do not play Soldier 76 to break shields and play the front line. Soldier wants to play the guerrilla warfare style, playing on the high ground and on an off angle or in the backline pressure. You have no CC and low shield break damage, making you a poor peeler and shield breaker, so you do not need to be playing behind your Rhine or with your team. Play him like a guerrilla soldier. Now, moving on to the character number 13, we have Hanzo. And the biggest mistake I see with Hanzo players is they panic waste Storm Arrow in a 1v1 after hitting one body shot. A full charge body shot does 125 damage, but a body shot from Storm Arrow only does 60. So it would take a regular body shot plus 2 Storm Arrow shots to kill a 200 HP hero. But if it's a 250 HP hero, it actually would take 1 body shot plus 3 Storm Arrow shots, which if you just hit 2 body shots, you get to potentially save your Storm Arrow and kill the enemy actually quicker. Moving on to character number 14, we have Winston. And the biggest mistake that I see is Winston's just jumping right at an enemy Mercy or Genji. What you want to be doing is actually closing the gap against mobility-based characters like these, and then when the Mercy flies away or the Genji dashes away, you use your leap to chase after them. You don't use your leap to initiate, it's the follow through and follow up. Now, moving on to character number 15, we have Sombra. The biggest mistake that Sombra players make is they put their translocator so far away. You cannot be out of the fight for 45 seconds at a time. Put it on the high ground. Put it out of enemy LOS, but still in the area in the fight. You can get healed like everyone else. You don't need to go back to your spawn or to a health pack on the other side of the map. Also, don't hack every single mega. If it wastes time that you could be potentially using to build up ult charge, sometimes you waste 10, 15% ult charge just waiting right when the game starts to hack a mega instead of actually being near the enemy spawn and hacking them or potentially shooting at them, building up that ult charge as they come out. Now, moving on to character number 16, we got Zarya. And the thing that you need to do consistently on Zarya is go in with your bubbles in a cycle. Do not push forward without self-bubble, and you need to be pulling back after you used it. Relaying to your main tank is also incredibly important on Zarya because it helps you get ult charge and it helps their main tank take more damage and take more space. Zarya is one of the few characters that, in my mind, no comms on is frankly unacceptable and it's going to cost you a lot of games. Now moving on to character number 17, we have Baptiste. Now the biggest mistakes that players make on Baptiste is with immortality. They don't understand the value it brings and then they don't use it correctly. First, you need to be calling immortality field. It's extremely vital. I can't tell you how many times players have thrown immortality fields down only for their teammates just to walk out of it because they're not saying a word. Teammates, when they're low, naturally want to run back to their healers and behind natural cover. They're not going to be phase taking out in the open, so as they get low, they instinctively want to move to safety, not stay in your immortality field out in the middle of nowhere. You have to relay that to them. On top of that, using it behind natural cover is the best way to protect your immortality field and get value. If you could use it behind a corner, it makes it far more difficult for the enemies to destroy it. Now moving on to character number 18, we have Ashe. Now, something important to understand is that Ashe's hipfire actually does more overall DPS, damage per second, but it vastly wastes your ammo. Remember that ammo conservation is the most important part of Ashe's playstyle. You need to be coinciding your repositioning with reloading to make sure that you have ammo when you need it. Lastly, do not challenge other sniper rifles outside of your effective range if they can one-shot you, like Hanzo and Widow. If you could win these matchups against these snipers in a long-distance battle, that's only because you're grossly out-skilling them, not because it's the correct thing to do, and it will not work against better players. Now moving on to character number 19, we have Moira. Now the biggest problem with Moira players is not utilizing their healing and correctly conserving it. One single tap of heal will heal 65 HP for 4 seconds. You need to save heal as much as possible in poke fights and save your charge so that you have it when you need it. Use your heal orb far more than damage orb in sustaining fights, and you'll build up ult charge even faster, also as a little bit of a bonus. Now moving on to character number 20, we have Tracer. Now, the biggest mistake that Tracer players make, and they're still making it and it's driving me absolutely insane, is that they are routing to the enemy using all their abilities. If you are right on top of an enemy with no blinks, because you use 3 blinks to get to them, you do not have any resources to duel them. Do you think a 150 HP Tracer is going to be able to duel someone that has more health in their effective range without any mobility? No, that's frankly not possible. Route to the enemy as close as possible, use your blinks to duel them, and then you have your recall if things get sticky, plus you could easily follow up on them as long as you're not recalling back across the map. As a bonus tip, make sure you practice good crouch spamming plus sway movement against characters like McCree, making it a lot more difficult for him to headshot you while messing up your aim only marginally in comparison. Now moving on to character number 21, we have Deva. Now, of course, Deva can eat some entry spam, but make sure that you save a little bit of it to eat powerful cooldowns and abilities like Anti-Nade or Dynamite. Now, the biggest mistake that Deva players make all the time is they don't really utilize her mobility and they don't really play the high ground enough. As Deva, you can go back and forth between the high ground, high and low, and if you're on the high ground, you're on a vantage point where you can easily see allies that need peeling with your DM, or you can easily dive someone that's weak because you have this vantage point plus your mobility. Now moving on to character number 22, we have Brig. Now, Brig cannot face tank enemies anymore. Your shield is flimsy, you need to be using it to block key cooldowns, not just face tanking damage. Please use natural cover and save bash to cancel abilities like accretion or breather, or stun an enemy right before their death to prevent them from any counterplay. Now, moving on to character number 23, we have Pharah. Against non-widows or hit scans that don't have their ultimates like Visor and High Noon, fly as high as possible and spam from the absolute farthest range. Your effective range is infinite compared to almost every other character in the game besides Widow, of course. Now, against your specific counters, you need to be playing the Pharah dive bomb minigame, where you play around cover, you basically just try to occupy their time, make it really annoying for them, and then you fight for positioning to make a play on them. You try to get into that neutral space where you're close enough to concussion blast in, dive bomb them. Once they're dead, you go right back to playing really far up, and nothing can touch you. Moving on to character number 24, we have Sigma. Now, the biggest mistake on Sigma is similar to Brig, and it's letting your shield break. Never, ever, ever let your shield break when you're playing Sigma, and to do so, you need to be playing around natural cover. Against other tank compositions, if you're playing the role of main tank, you're not off-angling, you're main tanking, your job is to start off taking space, use your shield plus your kinetic grasp and your damage to put pressure into the enemy while backing up. You want to be putting shield pressure into enemy Rhines that are pushing up on you, because that prevents him from taking space too aggressively. The last thing that you want to happen to you on Sigma is to get swarmed. Now, moving on to character number 25 on our list, we have Wrecking Ball. Now, as Wrecking Ball, you should almost never die unless you're hacked. Now, against CC heavy comps, it's definitely possible for you to die if you slam into them, so simply don't. Just swing through them, create displacement, getting large adaptive shields, and building ult charge. If you could displace enemies and bait cooldowns, that is immensely important, because CC heavy comps, a great amount of their power level comes from their CC. If you can bait those out and displace the enemy and still live, then it can easily allow your team to make a play on the enemy after the fact. No amount of perceived value is usually worth your life, so really keep that in mind. You should almost never all-in slam the enemy unless your team is engaging them at the exact same time. Now, moving on to character number 26, we have Widowmaker. Now, the biggest mistake I see VOD reviewing Widowmaker players, doesn't matter what rank, is that when they take off angles or flanks, or when they're trying to hit incredibly easy shots, they are actually crouch spamming and juking left and right. If no one sees you, there is no point in you not planting your feet. Remember, your own mobility actually hurts your own shots, and I understand the need to feel like you need to juke, but keep two things in mind. One, there's no reason to juke enemies that don't actively see you at all, because they're not going to do damage to you. And two, even if they are trying to do damage to you, if you can plant your feet and hit your shot anyways, you will almost always win the matchup, because you only have to hit one shot, and hitting that shot is incredibly important. Do not make it harder than it has to be, and plant your feet on Widow before you take a shot. Now, moving on to character number 27, Symetra. Now, the biggest problem I see with Symetra players is that they really get tunnel visioned on a goal and they don't adapt. Let me give you this example. A lot of times when you're playing on something like Hanamura Attack, you want to teleport to point, and the enemy sees this, they will often reposition to go to the point or kind of play in the mid zone so they can easily punish a teleporter. If you see this, a lot of Symetras will just still teleport on the point, and guess what? That's going to get completely messed up. You're not going to get any value. So what do? Try to mix it up. If the enemy pulls back to try to outplay a teleport to point, teleport to the high ground on the left, teleport in on the right. The enemies will always leave at least one avenue open to exploit just due to the nature of teleport. They can't contest every single place you could teleport to. I personally think that adaptive Symetra teleporter use can allow you to get tons of impact in scenarios you never thought possible before. Now, moving on to character number 28, we have Zenyatta. Now, the biggest mistake I see on Zenyatta is kind of random Discord use. Discord should either be one on the enemy main tank or on some really high value target. Pharah, Ekka, or potential dive targets are great because it allows your team to contest them far easier. However, main tank is the default because of the breakpoint adjustment. Having slightly more damage on the enemy Rhine, for example, can mean that he takes more pressure from Rhine swings, potential damage, he has to use his shield more. It's a cascade effect that can really hurt the enemy Rhine's play and prevents him from making space, which also directly hurts the enemy team as well. So that is the typical default that your Discord should always be on, and you should try to call it whenever your Discord swaps. Also, please stop spamming volley all the time. If you're just trying to break shields, using your primary fire is the most effective. I understand that you want to try to get that snipe pick, and that's appropriate sometimes, but do not be like a volley only Zen. Please, no. Now, moving on to tip number 29 is Torb. Now, the biggest mistake I see on Torb is a lot of players want to use his shotgun fire, his alternate fire. And frankly, his alternate fire is just underpowered. Unless you're extremely, and I mean extremely close, it's almost always better to use his primary fire and just try to hit headshots. You might think I'm joking, but I'm not. His primary fire is actually pretty reliable when you get the hang of it, and it can potentially do far more damage and allow you to duel enemies far easier. Now, moving on to character number 30, we have IRISA. And the biggest mistake that I see for IRISA players is they don't actually think about what their pull is trying to accomplish before they use it. You need to be thinking about what you're trying to combo with your team before you pull the enemy. Maybe you're trying to combo with the Doom, for example. You want to get some punch pull value. It is far better for you to pull them to where their back is against a wall, allowing for your Doomfist to easily follow up by punching them into the wall. You pull them right out in the open or even up, your Doomfist is going to have a hard time potentially comboing with that. Next up, maybe they're rushing you like a Ryan Zara wants to rush you down. Pulling them up and backwards can potentially pull them away from you and give you time to spam into them so that they have weaker health totals and weaker shield health before they're right on top of you. Identifying what the role of your pull is first and then executing it, and then on top of that, as icing on the cake, calling it to your team can be a way that you get way more value on IRISA, and it really separates the poor IRISAs from the great IRISAs, because that's really how you differentiate yourself on this character, is with pull usage and how good you use your pulls. Now moving on to character number 31, we have Junkrat. When people play Junkrat, the biggest mistake that I see is using their mobility, their mind, in the LOS of enemy McCree, Hanzos, Widowmakers. The thing is, take any Widowmaker montage ever, right? Look at a crazy Widowmaker montage, and I want you to take note of how many people are jumping every single second in every single 4K or 5K. I guarantee you at least half of those characters are jumping, and usually more. The thing about Junkrat's arc is it's like a super jump that is extremely hard to miss, I'm being honest. The fact of the matter is, at the apex of his mobility and his fall, is all predictable movement that makes shots on the Junkrat incredibly easy. And this is something you really need to keep in mind, because I really think that a lot of Junkrats really like to make it easy for the enemy and let the enemy play essentially duck hunt because of their own mobility. You're actually making your own survivability far less. Now moving on to the last character on the list, everyone's favorite recently buffed character, Bastion. Now, I know I probably should be giving tips to Bastion players, but I'm going to do it anyways, so if you lose to a Bastion, you know exactly who to thank. So the biggest thing about Bastion is when you're playing a Bastion, you're set up on the cart, for example, a lot of times enemies will start to sandbag ultimates to counter you. Things like Dragon Strikes, things like May Freeze, and eventually they're just going to cascade all these ultimates onto the point. They're going to guaranteed get you off the point, and then they're never going to let you set back up on the point, and then essentially you're forced to swap off Bastion. So as a Bastion player, what do you do to counteract this? Well, the thing is, you need to be actively tracking these ultimates. Hanzo ult, May Freeze, like I said, big ultimates like that. And when you know that the enemies have these, the best thing that you can actually do is when you're pushing a payload, you physically get off the payload and play an adjacent angle. Now you might be asking, why do you do this? Well, the thing is, if you're playing an adjacent angle and your team are still pushing the objective, sure, there's less power level on the objective, but the enemy has to choose to contest you or the objective. And if they contest you, a lot of times the objective can safely get to point, and it makes it a lot easier for your team to fight on cart. And if they try to contest the objective because they have to and they want to ignore you, then you're just going to annihilate them. So that's something to really keep in mind. You do have counterplay when enemies have all these abilities. At the end of the day, you're still a character that has to be contested. You're still a character that cannot be left unchecked. And that's something that you should really utilize to get tons and tons of free value and free point captures. Now, you know, speaking of immense value on all the characters on this list, if only there was one place that you could go to find in-depth VOD reviews over every single character and become even better at the game of Overwatch. That would be pretty cool, huh? Anyways, if you liked this all-inclusive guide where I literally went over every single hero, definitely let me know in the comments down below. Smash that like button and let me know what other videos you want to see. Do you want to see an advanced guide for every single hero, or maybe one ultimate tip for every single hero? I can definitely make these videos even though they take a lot more time, as long as the community wants these kind of videos. Anyways, that's all I got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time,